All right, welcome everybody to episode 18 of the Virtual Fortress podcast. I'm your host, Jay Reed, aka the Virtual Wizard, and I'm happy once again to have another special guest, the hat trick, Johnny Quest, John Connor, my good friend, John Dalterio is back on for the third time. And fun fact, you and my brother are the only ones to appear on the Virtual Fortress podcast 3 or more times, man. So kudos to you.
It's an honor.
Yeah. I'm glad you're here, man. We got some stuff to talk about. Before we get into that, you recently just had a birthday a few days ago, and you reached the mecca of 30 years old, man. So happy birthday once again. How does it feel to be 30? I know it's a new place in your life, and you've survived 30 years of gaming, man. How does it feel?
That's a good way to put it. It feels good. It feels like I have permission to like be more of an adult, or at least I'm giving myself that permission. I always have like these excuses. When I was a teenager, I was like, nah, I just want to skateboard. And I'm a teenager, so I can get away with it.
Right.
I turned 20 and I was like, well, I guess I should go to college now, probably, because I can't say I'm a teenager anymore. And now that I'm 30, I'm like, oh, I guess I got to start thinking about like paying my bills reliably all the time and like putting money aside for groceries and starting my own business if I can do that. And it's going to be a good decade. Knock on wood.
Yeah. So knock on wood. Yeah, I remember when I turned 30, I say you don't get older, you get better. So welcome to the 30 Club. And without further ado, let's get into some gaming, man. I know this is actually the first podcast I have done since the pandemic hit us back in mid-March. This is something a little different. John, fun fact, actually, John is the only guest to have 3 different types of meetings with me through this podcast. So the first time you came last summer of 2019, you came to the Virtual Fortress. You were here in the flesh. And then the second time was via phone call. And the third time we're doing Zoom, man. So you're the first person to do it on all platforms, man. Like, you do it all.
You're doing it all. That's a hat trick for you. I wish I could be there in person. The Virtual Fortress is something to behold, but quarantine.
Yeah, we'll do it. We're definitely going to do it, man. This will all pass and we will definitely be back gaming together, as you know. I'm kind of interested to hear what you've been playing over the past 4 or 5 months during this pandemic. I know we were all locked up in the crib. I know I was, and I got a chance to really just soak in my collection and just see what I have and just, play some games and try to beat some games that I've never tried before. But yeah, I'm interested to hear what you've been playing, man, in the gaming world.
Yeah. So, man, so many games, first of all. We were in communication about this right when quarantine hit. Resident Evil 3 came out.
Yep.
So I started playing that. I even like did this trick that I read about on Reddit where you can set your time zone on your PlayStation. For me, it was the PlayStation 4 to Australia, so you could get the demo of Resident Evil 3 Remake a day earlier. And I was like, I've been locked in the house for a week at that time. Everything was super.
You did text me and told me to do it too, to get it early.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like,
yeah, I just dove right into it. And that game really carried me through the first. It's a short game. That's like big criticism about that game. But it's great. It carried me through the first like 2 weeks.
It's short.
Yeah, it's short, but it's great.
It's a short game, short and sweet. As like I say, that game was really, really good. The only thing I didn't like about the game is that there was a lot of I felt it was pretty simple. It was pretty easy. I feel Resident Evil Remake 2 was way harder, way more complicated, but grabbing certain supplies that you need and going back and forth and doing all this and go up to the clock tower and all that stuff. But this was just like short, sweet, just find your way through, defeat Nemesis, and they were all cutscenes too. So that was the only thing that was kind of like, yeah, you had your battle with Nemesis, but they were mostly cutscenes, and they were beautiful cutscenes. But the interaction fighting Nemesis could have been a little bit better. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, there, the game has been mocked a lot on Reddit. It is short and sweet. I agree with that. One of the main things that I keep seeing is how a lot of the Nemesis fights are like the same as the one that came before it, with like one little bit that's different.
Right.
So for example, when you first get the grenade or the mine gun, you shoot mines to the wall and they stick and explode. And
Right.
you're fighting Nemesis in the little town square. I don't
Yeah,
know
and
what you would call that.
he has to run around and hopefully he runs on a mine and explodes and you have to keep hitting them and like I remember
Yeah,
that. The
I love
plot.
that. I thought that was super fun.
Yeah, that was
And then
cool.
so I saw this on Reddit. It was like a picture of that, and then right next to it was a picture of fighting Nemesis in that like little, it's like a gladiator ring kind of, but there's a bunch of these like electrical towers all around you and they have numbers and you have to shoot the numbers so that
Right.
they zap him and he falls to the ground, which is
Yeah.
like the same sort of battle you just fought.
And they have
I
like
actually didn't
they
make
have
that.
zombies too, like coming at you at the same time. And depending
Yes.
on the difficulty, more zombies come at you.
Yeah.
Maybe like 3 or 4 at a time within the hardest difficulty, but then like maybe like one or one
Yeah.
or two with an easier difficulty. But it was a good game. It was dope.
I
I
love
mean,
it.
even the last fight with that huge plant monster with like, well, it's Nemesis, but like we had like 6 hearts or whatever it was, and like you have to shoot the heart, and then you have to push in
The rail gun.
rail gun and do all that. It was
That's pretty
pretty
cool.
easy. It was dope, but it was really easy and it was really like cutscene ish.
Yes.
But I know in like the hardest difficulty, it's like one hit kill. So I
Yeah.
mean, I guess that challenged because I was watching a lot of videos on Twitch of people playing that the hard version, and it looked like they were not having
A lot of fun.
hit by the tentacles, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but yeah, Resident Evil 3. If you haven't played it, you're missing out. It was really sad because like I'm a person that like to collect physical copies, and like I had to resort to a digital copy because of the pandemic. Nothing was open in April. It was actually at its peak of the virus that's going like GameStop, and obviously there's no GameStop at all. So, but it got me through the pandemic. That's one of the games that I'm happy that got me through the pandemic. And John and I have been talking a lot about it. We've been talking a lot about Resident Evil for the past like year or so. So I'm glad that we get to connect on that. I mean, moving on. I mean, what else games have you been playing? I mean, a few games I've been playing. I've been diving into the Super Nintendo. I've been diving into Mafia, Hitman, Splinter Cell.
Splinter
Just
Cell,
diving.
classic.
Just trying to like take games that will take my sweet time. I actually recently beat, which is probably one of the hardest games on a Super Nintendo, Super Ghouls and Ghosts. And the thing about that game is you have to complete it twice. So you get all the way to the end to save the princess or whatever, and she says, sorry, you have to get the goddess bracelet to come back, and you have to go back to the beginning, get the goddess bracelet to come save me to defeat Sardius. So you have to go all the way back and play exactly what you played before. But getting into something that you highly enjoy doing so much, which is Dungeons and Dragons. If you may know, John is an avid fan of Dungeons and Dragons. He's an amazing storyteller, and this is what he loves to do. It's his passion. Just explain to them, for those out there in podcast land who don't know what Dungeons and Dragons is. Give them the 411.
Dungeons and Dragons came about, I think, in the 80s, maybe the 70s. And it is just it's a tabletop role-playing game. And the entire game takes place in your imagination as the player and as the game master, the person who tells the story that the players play through. So you can sit down at a table with a group of friends, or in this case, in the context of quarantine, everyone can sit in front of their computers, and we share a tabletop. I'm usually the dungeon master. That's like my trade right now.
Of course, of course.
And it's it plays on a lot of my passion for video games, like a lot of the things that stuck with me from the games that I played when I was younger come out when I'm running a session of D&D. And the kids that I run it for are generally between like 10 and 14, with some exceptions on either end of the age scale. They've never played Final Fantasy VII or any of those games, or luckily some of them have seen like the Studio Ghibli films. So, it's cool to bring in like characters or make references to those stories. They get excited about them.
Right.
But yeah, it's like I tell you a story, you're a character in the story, and I put you in a situation. It could be combat, you could have to steal a special item for a king, anything, any situation that you can imagine. D&D can put you in there, and then you tell me as the player, you're the player, how you want to deal with that situation. And usually I say, okay, you can try that. There's some wacky suggestions with ways regarding ways to like solve problems you can imagine with a group of like 12-year-olds. But usually you say yes. And the real deciding factor is the dice, the 20-sided dice right here. This is the first dice I ever owned, and I got it probably 5 years ago. It's very special.
Nice.
My sacred dice. So if you go, I want to backflip off the edge of a cliff and turn the rain into a staircase that I can walk down halfway down. I would say, okay, you can try it. You might have a spell that lets you shape water, and then you would roll the dice. Depending on the number, if it's high or low, that's basically saying it tells you if you succeeded or failed. There's more to it than that. There's a lot of strategy. There's stats for your characters that make them better or worse at some things. Spells, abilities, items, all kinds of stuff. It's highly customizable. But yeah, it really boils down to a storytelling game that takes place in a world that the dungeon master, me, and the players create together. I'll set up a plot. For example, in the Studio Ghibli style campaign that I'm running right now for 6, 12, and 13-year-olds, I knew that one of them was super interested in Studio Ghibli, the Miyazaki films, specifically Spirited Away, Kiki's Delivery Service, the classics, Princess Mononoke. So I was like, okay, so I'm going to build this world for them to play in D&D. So they all begin on this island that is described as a garden island. Everything's lush, vivid, green, blossoming all year round. And everyone lives in close proximity with nature. They live like in tree houses, and they fish to pass the time. And the conflict that they have to deal with is that blight, or this sort of like rotting magic, is starting to kill the gardens all across the island. So they have to go find the source of this blight that's spreading, and they have to take care of it in one way or another. And it's spiraled in so many crazy directions, but that is still the general plot, and that's the game that they're playing. So in a way, it's sort of like I'm making a video game for them. What it is just, it's a game, it's a set of mechanics, rules, and I would be the algorithms, I guess, or the AI that they bounce ideas off of. And we have a game, and it's great. It's like a great tool for youth work, it's like group therapy in a way,
right?
Social work. I also work with like neuroatypical people in smaller groups playing D&D. It's just a great interface to be whoever you want and to try to do whatever you want. You can explore so much, like the inner realms of the mind in this game, if it's done right. So it's very special, actually. It's really special to me.
Yeah, and it's amazing to see what you do. Like, I've played probably maybe 5, 6, 7 sessions of D&D with John, and I feel great. I feel I feel like I know what I'm doing because he makes people feel so comfortable as a DM. So yeah, and it's cool because there's no right or wrong answer. It's just whatever you decide, however you can use your imagination is what it's going to be. And that's the cool thing about Dungeons and Dragons, because even for people that have never played like me, I'm fairly new player, to be honest. And like, obviously, like I feel comfortable with John being my DM because he knows what to do and I don't. So he's the man, he's the master, and he's the myth.
Oh, thanks,
It's
man.
really good. Yeah, no problem.
You,
Anytime. But like, how would you compare, you know, D&D to video games? Like, how is it different and how is it similar in your eyes?
the first thing that comes to mind is that D&D is like infinite in a way. It's boundless. It can be and do whatever you want at a given time. So if you wanted to play as like I saw like I think Critical Role did this really cool Doom themed
Oh,
Dungeons and Dragons session when the new
oh
Doom edition came out.
wow.
And actually, this is probably a great way to reference both that or sort of answer that question, I guess.
Sure.
Um, Obviously, they flavored the session after Doom, so all the players were demons instead of good guys, which is pretty typical in D&D. They were
Mm.
playing the bad guys from Doom, and the person they were fighting was the main character that you would play as in the video game. I
Ah.
forget what his name is. He has like some enigmatic name, like the Stomper or the Killer or something. The big bad guy, big good guy. Anyway,
You go with
so it
that.
flipped the tables, and everybody was playing like different demons, and it was super fun and quirky. And the video game Doom is great. It's a lot of fun. It's a certain kind of fun, and you get that certain kind of fun every time you play it. So it's reliable in that way, and it's consistent. I don't think it has a mode to let you play as the demons trying to kill the good guy in air quotes. So freedom comes to mind, freedom of thought and imagination uh, that is unique to D&D. It has rules, but they're not constricting. The rules that it has guide you through playing the game. They teach you how to play the game.
Right.
Video games are also freeing. I think of like No Man's Sky, which I think is like a procedurally generated universe that you can travel to and find random things
Mm.
that's pretty exciting. I love that. I was intrigued by that idea when it first came out.
Yeah,
It
that's
wasn't
cool.
received too well, but
Yeah.
so I
But
think I don't know, video games are much different. We talk about Max Payne a lot because that's one of your favorite games, if not your favorite, Max Payne.
it is my favorite game. Yeah, Max Payne is my favorite game of all time. That game like got me through high school, man. Like
I love
it's
that game
just
too.
yeah, it's an amazing game. If you haven't heard of Max Payne, it's about a New York cop whose family is murdered and he's out for revenge. So that's all I'm gonna say. Look on
Yeah.
YouTube for the rest of it. It's an amazing game. There's bullet time. I know you mentioned something about bullet time before.
Mm.
Are you
Mhm.
able to use bullet time in you can use bullet time in D&D.
I mean, you can't, it's not called bullet time. It's, I
Stop.
was talking about how time is different in the game versus real life. Like
Hmm.
combat can take, in D&D, combat can take like 40 minutes if you're
Right.
lucky to get through an encounter. But in the game, in your character's mindset, um, each round is technically only 6 seconds long, even though one round can take 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Hmm.
So in a way, it is kind of like bullet time. But if you're a spellcaster in D&D, you can slow down and stop time in different ways. Yeah, but I referenced Max Payne because that's the first thing that came to mind, but that's a very like linear narrative. Like you just described Max Payne perfectly in a couple sentences. Like you are a cop who's out for revenge. That's what you do. You buy
Mhm.
the game and that's who you play. And
Right.
it gives you a really compelling and specific story. The story is really engaging because it's so specific. D&D is not as specific in terms of the story and the plot. Like everyone who plays a session in D&D gets something different out of it. They imagine something different. The hallway, if I were to put them in that hallway for Max Payne where you're following the blood trail or whatever
Right. Oh
happens.
man, nightmares.
Yeah,
Nightmares.
exactly. But every player, if I were to speak that, like you walk into a dark hallway, the only thing you can see besides a faint orb of light at the far end is glimmering footprints in blood, for example. Everyone's going to picture it differently. There's no visual, so they hear that and then they have to interpret it, change sound to visual. So the color red is going to look different to each of them. The footprints are going to be different. Maybe they're wearing shoes, maybe they weren't. Maybe you can see texture on the wall in someone's mind when they hear what I just described. Maybe it's just black, empty void everywhere. So there's a little bit of magic with D&D, is that interpretive step, like hearing something and then visualizing something. Video games don't do that, but they have strengths, you know, they have strengths and D&D has weaknesses and vice versa. So specificity is one. I think that video games, you know, benefit from big time.
Yeah.
And they're innovative with mechanics. Like bullet time is a great mechanic that I think it was like coined, it was invented maybe for Max Payne and then it spread everywhere.
Right.
And everything could do that, which is awesome. I love that. So they're really different, similar in some ways, really different in others. I don't want to say video games aren't freeing because they're an escape, just like anything else. But the amount of things you can do, I guess, is different.
That's the first time I've ever seen bullet time. So yeah, I agree with you that it's an escape. It's so you can get away from your problems and just playing video games. And a lot of people think that video games are just like worthless, but to understand it is like you have to understand it. It's not like, and that's the same thing with me, is that I don't just, you know, sit at home all day and play video games. Well, during the pandemic, yes, but but like, yeah, it's more than that. It's a passion. It brings back memories. Like I can remember where I was in my life. I've mentioned this before. I can remember certain parts and pieces of my life through video games, where I was at that time, who bought it for me, a memory that I had with my dad or my mother or grandmother or grandfather or brother through a video game. And if it's like, oh, this game came out this year, and oh, I remember going to KB Toys and my grandmother buying me this game. That's the way I remember. So it does boost up my memory and in a way. So I think it's pretty cool for me. So I mean that's dope.
Yeah, it does the same for me. When you said KB Toys, I had a very vivid flashback of what that was like. That was like my birthday or like Christmas for me. Every time I went there, I was just like, I'm coming away with something great, and I'm gonna escape into it for the next like 2 months.
Yeah, KB Toys is where it was at. Yeah, actually, I wanted you to get into a little bit more of how, like, a session that you run with D&D, that you allow people to do whatever they want. And like, I know we talked about sessions that you run, and it went all over the place. So yeah, if you get into that a little bit more, because I think that's pretty amazing how it spirals out of control in a way sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's one of the therapeutic aspects of the game, is that people can get wild and they're still on track. As long as I can keep them playing the game, they're still on track. So there's I had the most ridiculous 2 sessions actually last week with my regular group. They're a bunch of 12 and 13-year-olds. And I first started working with them when I became a dungeon master for Pandemonium Books and Games in Central. They were my first group ever. And we've grown like really tight over the past year, just meeting up 2 times a week reliably. Like every week we play 2 games of Dungeons and Dragons, and it's great for all of us. So I mentioned them because this story comes from a recent session that we all had. It was my birthday recently, like we said in the beginning. So we put sort of the main story of our recurring sessions on hold, on hiatus. And we did 2 one-shots, which means it's like a self-contained adventure. A one-shot is meant to only exist. the characters, the world, the conflict only exists within one session, doesn't go on for like a year or two. So we did 2 of those. They ended up being 2 one-shots that were in the same world, whatever. It got really out of control really quickly. I set up this like really elaborate, I think, and detailed story in this like beautiful place, which is like a little town that sits at the foot of a massive sacred mountain called Hallowed Mountain. Original, I know. And the town's name was Odom. Fantasy name generators for the win right there.
Lamar is a basketball player. Any connection there? Lamar Odom. Nope. Okay. All right. No. Moving on.
Or yes. Yeah. So because this was a limited campaign, all the players were going to just make ridiculous characters and play a ridiculous session. They knew this. I didn't know that. So I went in taking it very seriously. We began the session with one of their homebrewed, which means made up, basically, characters running out of the woods, chasing a butterfly, trying to catch it. And when they emerge from the woods, they see this huge pond. It's nighttime. The moon is reflecting on the pond. It's really beautiful. The town's all around, set back a few hundred yards from the pond. And there's a concert going on at the foot of the mountain. The person who's chasing the butterfly, I had them roll the dice to see if they could catch it. They rolled horribly, which means instead of catching it, they fell in the pond. The butterfly flutters away. And they are just sort of floating in the pond for a minute. Another character was standing nearby. The homebrewed character, this person who just fell in the pond, is really dumb. That's their shtick. The character's just dumb. I was like, okay, we'll have you play a dumb character. We'll see how that goes. The dumb character thinks the other player is the butterfly, even though it's a human, pretty much. He's like, oh, that's where the butterfly ran over and belly flopped on top of him. And I was like, okay, roll the dice to see if you can belly flop successfully, I guess. Like, there's no mechanic for that, but I had to come up with it on the spot. And they did. And for the next like 45 minutes, they were just having like a pig pile fight with another character came over and joined the pig pile, and they were just trying to get on top. And I was like, what is this game? I did not plan for this. Meanwhile, the other 2 characters who are actually putting on a concert for the whole town are 2 chickens, literally chickens. I was like, you're playing chickens? Where is this going? Turns out they play the bagpipes really well. So they're putting on a bagpipe concert. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm like, okay, so I might have to forfeit the whole plot. Bagpipe playing chickens, a pig pile fight, a stupid character who can't tell a butterfly away from a human. I let it go on for like an hour and a half because they were having fun and they were laughing. And I was laughing. I was having fun too. And I was like, okay, wait, we gotta get back on track. Here's the plot. A giant koi fish falls out of the sky and lands in the pond. The water is displaced up into the air. It starts raining this pond water down. And the whole performance that they were putting on with the bagpipes is called off because of rain. So everyone goes back home in their towns to try to stay dry. Meanwhile, the town elders come out. They're like, what's with this koi? What's going on? Can you guys check it out? Because a couple of them said they live at the top of the mountain. Their character's backstory says they live on the mountain. I was like, okay, we can make that work. Because they live there, the elders were like, can you see what happened to this koi? So I gave them the quest. At this point in D&D, it's like, here's your mission. We did some setup. Y'all had fun, but here's what you're supposed to do, not have to do. And of course they didn't do it. So I was like, in character, I was like, you must travel to the top of Hallowed Mountain and seek out what has killed the god of the koi fish or something. And I was like, do you accept this quest? And one of the kids is like, I want to throw cheese at him. Like, you want to throw cheese? What do you mean? He's like, I want to throw cheese in the air and drop kick a wedge of cheese so it hits the person who just gave us the quest. I was like, all right, fine, go for it. Yeah, go for it. Roll the dice, see if it hits. And it does. He gets smacked in the face with cheese. And then there's a cheese fight that breaks out. Okay, and I'm just like, okay, so you're all throwing cheese at one another, basically. I let that go on. The end of the session that first session ended with them throwing cheese at each other. And I was like, 2 days later, I have the second half of the session. How do I get him back on track? Okay, so we start the second session. Out of the sky, just like the giant koi that fell out of nowhere, drops in this giant bullywug, which is a huge frog. And it smells the cheese and it wants to eat the cheese and it's going to fight you for all of your cheese. And I realize it sounds so absurd. It gets even more absurd. They fight this frog. The frog steals one of the characters who's a self-described cheese lord and jumps to the top of the mountain. The rest of the group has to go to the top of the mountain. They don't know how to get there. Turns out the frog dropped a talking wheel of cheese. So I have to figure out, as the dungeon master, what does a wheel of cheese sound like? Turns out it talks a lot like this. This is the cheese's voice. And the kids love that accent. So
it's
for
like
the next
Neil. It's
3
like
hours.
Neil. That's Neil from Family Guy.
Family Guy. Yep. Yes, I'm a talking wheel of cheese. The kids loved it. So I was a talking wheel of cheese for 3 hours.
Wow.
They get to the top of the mountain. They find their friend who's held hostage. They put a wheel of cheese into an open slot in this mural of wheels of cheese. And it seems like they're starting to summon a god because they put the last piece of the puzzle in there. I'm like, okay, we're back on track. It's going to get dramatic. They're like, no, we take the cheese wheel back out. I was like, crap. Okay, so there's no god fight. Nothing happens. Turns out they accidentally killed the butterfly that the main character, the first character, was chasing. And they're like, kids are super upset when an animal dies, or an insect in this case. So they were very sad about that. I gave them a chance to revive it. They broke open the wheel of cheese because they realized it was evil, the talking wheel. Some cheese spilled on the butterfly. Suddenly the butterfly comes back to life, covered in cheese. And now the butterfly starts speaking like this as well. So now everything that has cheese on it speaks like this. And like pretty much that's where it ended. Like they saved the butterfly and they watched the sunrise over the mountain together. And the sun was referred to as the great wheel of cheese in the sky. And they were like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Until the sunrise, they were like, oh, that's what it means. It was just completely ridiculous. I feel like I lost some IQ points, like telling you that story. And if you stuck around, thanks for listening to that. What video game? Is there a video game that can do that?
I don't know. I mean, a game that can let you do whatever you want with a big wheel of cheese. Like that's crazy. Like, and that's the great thing about D&D is like anything could happen. You know,
Anything.
It's crazy.
They played through like a meme for 6 hours, and the kids were like, "That was the greatest session we've ever had." Meanwhile, I'm over here writing like Lord of the Rings for them to play through, and they want a talking wheel of cheese and to be able to drop kick it at people. And it's crazy. It's wild. But I liked it. They liked it. And yeah, I don't think you could buy a game like that. Some games are weird. Mr. Mosquito, for example.
Yeah, that's a cool game, Mr.
They
Mosquito.
do. Games can get a little wacky, but yeah.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to the next topic. I know you were interested in talking about video games, our favorite games that we wished, both of us wished that kept going and allowed us to do something that we never could. If you want to elaborate on that, of your games, and I would love to hear those.
First one that comes to mind is Metal Gear Solid. I've talked about that game like to death probably, and on this podcast especially, but I played that game a lot. And Cyborg Ninja was the coolest character, in my opinion, in that game. Right. And Snake, Snake is cool. Solid Snake is very cool. But Cyborg Ninja could like do backflips and cut people up with a sword and go invisible and all kinds of stuff. Block bullets with his blade. Like I wanted that. I wanted to play like that. Yeah. And you couldn't in the main game. I know this for a fact. I bought this game for this reason. Metal Gear Solid VR missions, where you just did the training missions and that was the whole game. But they were elaborate. They were like puzzles. They were really complicated and a lot of fun. You can eventually unlock, I think like 4 VR missions where you can play a cyborg ninja. Gray Fox is his code name. And I played that to death, to the point where I could like speed run those 4 missions. They were no problem. You could like do you could like flip and jump, which you could not do in Metal Gear Solid. The same button to jump as Cyborg Ninja is the button you use to crawl as Snake. So completely different, way cooler. You could deflect bullets as you're running. You can swish the blade around and cut people up, and it was great. And I would like play that game repeatedly, the same four missions repeatedly for hours. And when I was in school, I would think about being that character, like middle and high school, or probably not high school, mostly middle school. But I would draw Cyborg Ninja in every class because I was just obsessed. Like I wanted to play that character. And D&D means I can play that character. In fact, the first character I made when I was a player is Gray Fox, pretty much like a samurai. A little different, but pretty much the same thing. So
That's
that's the
dope.
one that really stands out to me. Final Fantasy VII, also playing as Sephiroth, the big bad guy with the like 40-inch katana. He's like super powerful. He's your nemesis across 4 discs of gameplay. And he was just the coolest character, I thought. So you could play as him with like Game Shark or something, some kind of cheat codes, but you know, I just wish that that was like in the game. I think there was a fighting game that came out where you could play as Sephiroth that had Final Fantasy characters in it. I forget what it's called. I was obsessed with that game for a while. I just wanted to like play as characters that you couldn't play as. You know, I wanted that really bad. And
Yeah,
that's why I like D&D. You can do any of that stuff.
I remember. I guess it's just not really a big thing. It's probably like every kid's dream, but I remember wanting to play as M. Bison, and he wasn't a playable character in the original Street Fighter World Warrior. That's back in like 91. So a throwback. But I wanted to be M. Bison because he was cool. He was badass, and like he was always just like and I want to be him, but like you could never be him. But then when they came out with Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition, you were able to be the villains.
That's the goal, to also play as the bad guys. Yeah.
Yeah, because you want to be, and Sagat, which is the guy from Muay Thai fighter from Thailand. And yeah, I when that game came out, like I begged my grandmother to buy it for me. I told her to write a check because I didn't know how checks worked. So she wrote. I thought you could just write any amount of money for a check. I told the story before, and she got me a Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition for the Sega Genesis, and you were able to be the villains. And
It's the best thing ever.
it is the best. You're right. It is the best thing ever. Um, it was such a badass game for its time. It was way ahead of its time, and like even games like Metal Gear Solid, those were way ahead of its time. And you really like they really mess with your mind, like to come to a point where you have to like think and basically change up things. Like it's crazy. Like those games are way ahead of its time, and it's amazing to see that how somebody created that back in the early '90s. Because they live up to the like Guns of the Patriots and stuff like that. They live up to the modern days now, and like
Yeah.
I mean the other ones are cool. Like what is it, Phantom Pain?
Mhm.
Those games are cool, but you can never go back to the original
No.
and how it felt just playing that. I never opened. I remember opening the Metal Gear Solid case, and there's 2 like baby blue discs. I'll never forget that, and I'm just like, wow. But that game was amazing, and like yeah, for the Street Fighter 2, like it's game changing, But speaking of like gaming, uh, bosses and females, what was your gaming crush? That's a question I
Like,
wanted to ask you. Your gaming
that's
crush.
a good question.
Who are you like, wow? Because I
Good
know back in the
question.
days and now, like they made very like provocative characters. Like, a lot of cleavage showing, a lot of
Yeah. Yeah.
things
Yeah.
showing. So it's like, what was that character that was like, and it could be multiple, but what was the character, even now, what was the character that was like, oh man, she looks great.
That's a good question. Definitely just selling to underage boys or young boys with that kind of thing. And it
Right.
worked. It worked. Capture the imagination. I think I I was big into Final Fantasy X, I played all the Final Fantasy games as much as I could. And I think Yuna, which is kind of like, I don't know, out of all the females in that game, I think Yuna is the least you would expect to be crush worthy.
Right.
She's very wholesome. But I remember the scene where she was like doing this summoning dance, and it's like sunset and the graphics are beautiful, and she's like standing on just the top of this like shallow water, and she's like swinging the staff around, and it's really like elegant and beautiful. And I was like, yeah, I could be Titus. I could marry Yuna. 13-year-old me is like would marry her, even if she's like gonna die or whatever the plot point of that game is.
Yeah. Nah,
But I mean,
that's a good one.
That's like a wholesome.
I know you
crush.
like. I know you like Tifa too.
Who doesn't like Tifa? Come on.
Yeah. Even playing the Final Fantasy VII remake, I was kind of like, Cloud, what are you doing, yo? Like, she's like coming to your room and stuff, and he's like,
yeah,
oh, whatever. And she's like, let me know if you need anything. I'm like, Cloud, you're an idiot.
You know what?
That's what I was thinking. Like, oh my, okay. I'm like, all right, focus on the plot, Jay. Like,
right. You know what's not clear to me though is Tifa with Barrett, or are they like together helping raise the kid, but they're not officially together? I don't know. Like that was always super confusing to me, even in the remake. I don't
think
know
that's
what
it was. I think it felt like they had a relationship and then they just went their separate ways, and they still had, you know, that connection somehow. But
plus it's like messy because
into that game for Tifa.
Well, also Tifa and Cloud were best friends when they were younger, I think. So that complicates things if we're gonna reference like real life stuff, I guess.
Say that again.
Tifa and Cloud were best friends, I think, when they were younger.
Like there's a lot of characters that were like that. Yeah. Like I actually have a list.
Wait, a list of all your crushes or what? Oh, you glitched out. Too excited about it. Oh, you're back. You have a list?
Yeah, very good. Yep. Yeah. Like I was saying, like I have a list of video game crushes, and I wanted to read them to you and see if any of them resonated with you. We got Nina from Tekken.
Yep, definitely.
Blaze, that was my favorite. Blaze from Streets of Rage 2.
Yep, also good.
Chun-Li, obviously, from Street Fighter.
Yeah, classic.
Cammy from Street Fighter.
A lot of Street Fighter
Tifa on the list. Laura Croft.
Yeah, I mean, she was definitely the heartthrob of the '90s video game era.
Yeah, and then turned to, and then when Angelina Jolie played her, I was like, oh god, this is great. Yep. I have Claire Redfield. She was Claire Redfield, Jill Valentine, Sonya Blade from Mortal Kombat.
Oh yeah,
Katana and Melina and Jade from Mortal Kombat 2 and 3. And I have Princess Peach from
classic Princess Peach.
Mario Brothers. That was a list I kind of came up with. I know there's way more. I'm probably missing a whole bunch, but like that's a list that I came up that I could think of at the moment that I was like, I gotta mention these.
Yeah.
Like, you agree with that then?
Oh yeah, definitely. Who was the last one? Princess Peach. Yes, the damsel in distress. That's like, you know, if you've ever wanted to be a hero, classic hero story. Princess Peach.
Of course.
Is Bay.
Of course. Yep. Yeah, I mean, lastly, I want to talk about something that you were interested in, was you know, the speculation about futuristic video games that are highly customizable, like Cyberpunk 2020. Yeah, if you want to get more into detail about that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Cyberpunk is one example. I think they're CD Projekt Red, who's making it, also made The Witcher and other stuff. And those games are already games I want to be playing. Like they're pretty wide open. You can make a lot of choices. In The Witcher, you have to play as Geralt, but how you play Geralt changes, a little bit based on who's playing, or a lot based on who's playing the character. And like you can sit down and play the card game Gwent, I think, instead of like saving the damsel in distress in that game. So I really like that ability to make choices and to just like meander and like discover things on your own.
Right.
And Cyberpunk 2077 is looking like, first of all, it's been in production for like what, 10 years or something ridiculous like that. It looks like it's a sandbox, like you, and I love games like that. And you can just go around and be part of whatever faction you want, customize your character however you like. There are a lot of memes about that. Apparently, they let you customize everything.
Yep.
Wink. Which I don't have anything to do with that kind of thing in the games that I run, D&D. But it's interesting to see how much customization is like being included in games. Ideally, like, I think the singularity when it hits where all things are perfect and infinite in regards to technology, you can be and do whatever you want in a virtual world. Like, I guess like Ready Player One, kind of like that movie.
Oh yeah, great movie.
And I think we're getting there with games like Cyberpunk and with VR being more adaptable and adopted by more people. And it's exciting to see where that's going to go. The thing that I trip over when I think about that in Dungeons and Dragons is like the imagination is like vast and infinite and always really responsive to whatever somebody's doing. So like until a video game comes out where I can be like, no, I don't want to save Princess Peach. I want to throw cheese at Princess Peach's head. I want to throw a wedge of cheese at her head. And then I can have a game based on that. You know what I mean? Like then I'll believe that we've really reached a sort of pinnacle and apex in game design and freedom and customization. Until then, it's just interesting to see how much more freedom games afford you as they progress. Like they can make a huge city you can wander around for weeks at a time and not do anything. Right. What are those games? They're like
The Sims?
Take place in Tokyo. Yakuza. The Yakuza games.
Oh yeah, Yakuza. Yep. The PlayStation.
You can just you can play pachinko for like 6 hours in the game and do nothing. And I love that. I think that's super cool. It's like a game inside a game.
It's kind of like it's like Shenmue. It's the same thing.
Shenmue, yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I love that.
Yeah.
I've been looking for that. Video games have only touched on it here and there, but D&D, I found D&D and I was like, okay, this is what this is how you do it. This is what it's all about. And it's been great. I mean, I've been playing a lot of video games. I played Detroit Become Human recently, which it seems very narrow. You are these characters, you're in this world, you have to do this, but all the choices you can make change so much how the game progresses. At the end of each episode or chapter or whatever they call it, you see this branching path that has like, you start here and then you make 3 choices and then it goes out to like, there are like 80 different results based on if you saved a fish that fell out of the tank or not, or if you pet the dog or not. It's right. Crazy. So I love seeing stuff like that. I've been playing a lot of games like that, and it all feeds into Dungeons and Dragons as well. It's really like a nice confluence of things happening.
Yeah, that's really cool. And like, I don't know, there's a game called I haven't played it, but I've been told about it a lot by Byron. He was also a guest on the show a while back, but it's a game called A Way Out. Is that what it's called? Yeah, A Way Out. And basically it is only a 2-player game. You cannot play single player. You have to be, I believe you have to be online, and you play basically 2, prisoners trying to escape prison. That's it. And you have to work as a team to get out. I have not tried it. I'm interested in trying it, definitely. Is it a PlayStation exclusive? I don't think so. But yeah, you have to be online and you have to play with someone else. It is not a 1-player game. It's crazy. It sounds cool. It's kind of like, reminds me of a little bit of Kane and Lynch, but yeah, the aspect of just like you have to work as a team or you can't play the game at all is pretty cool in my eyes. I mean,
I like
games
that.
like that, yeah.
Yeah, so I like that idea of teamwork from Way Out. That's the same thing with D&D. If you have one member of the adventuring party who just wants to go out and murder all the shopkeepers and like steal what they would sell to the group, and the rest doesn't want that to happen, they want to keep people alive and like do business for real. Um, the game comes to like a grinding halt, and then people start to get upset with one another. So it really, the aspect of teamwork is there. It's always been there for D&D. And something I miss with video games is like couch co-op, like being able to sit down and share a TV screen and play a game together.
Yeah.
It's making a comeback, but games like that, Journey was a good game that forced two people to play together. And I think you like couldn't talk to each other or anything. You had to use like symbols to communicate. Then you had to solve puzzles and get through this world together. I love that about it. So much value
Yeah,
can be found in the social aspect of games. You know, bringing people together to solve a common problem.
even like GoldenEye, you know, couch
Oh
co-op,
yeah.
GoldenEye, and I don't know if you ever heard of for Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Yep.
And Nintendo. So yeah, that game, like there was a multiplayer mode, but it was just like bears and squirrels just chopping each other's heads off.
That's wild.
It was like cute, but it was like very violent. Chopping off a squirrel's head or chopping a bear's head and shooting them with a Magnum revolver or whatever.
Jeez.
It was like a cute, violent game. But those are games like, and I remember I used to just like tape the screens, like
Yep.
the CRT TV, just tape the screens, and then I'm just like, I stay on one side of the room, and my brother stays on the other side of the room, and one of my boys stays on, the bottom, the bunk bed. He gets his own,
Yep.
like, the right angle, the right corner of the TV, and it's like we played like that because there was a lot of screen watching, and I'm like, just don't watch my screen. Stop looking at my screen. How you know where I'm at?
Yeah,
And
right.
like that, yeah, it's just classic 90s. And you can't forget the bagel bites, like I mentioned earlier today. But
Oh my
yeah,
gosh. Love bagel bites.
PlayStation, Nintendo 64, and just PlayStation 2, and just pizza and bagel bites and Blockbuster.
Life.
So,
It was life.
hey, thank you. That's I was like, how am I gonna sum it all up? Life. That's what it was in the 90s, man.
Life.
But uh, Johnny Quest, man, you are the man. I love you, bro. Thank you so
Love you too,
much.
bro.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you so much for coming on for the third time. It's a blast every time you come on. We talk about some great stuff. And yeah, I appreciate what you're doing in D&D, man. And I want you to keep pushing, man, no matter what happens. Keep pushing. I know you want this D&D thing as a career, man. I believe in you. Yeah, just keep doing your thing, man. I support you 150%, man. Anything you need, any ideas, I don't know how much I can do for D&D because you're the master, but yeah, just know I got your back, and any journey you're taking in life, I got your back, and it's always a pleasure to talk about video games with you, man.
I
And
appreciate that, Jordan.
yeah, no problem. And yeah, before we go, favorite favorite uh favorite video game character of all time. Go. I know I put you on the spot, but we gotta
Oh
end with that.
man.
Gotta end with that.
It's gonna be Cloud Strife, I guess, from Final Fantasy VII.
Great choice. Cloud
I might
Strife.
regret that choice later, but I'll have to. That's what came to mind. So
Hey, when you're laying in bed and you say, "Oh, I want to change my answer," that's fine.
we'll do another one of these.
Yeah,
We
we'll
can
do.
talk
Yeah, we'll
about
do
that.
another. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see if you change your mind. But love you, bro. Yo, keep doing your thing, and like I say to all the gamers and you, keep gaming on, bro.
You too, man. Thank you. Love you too. Thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure.
No doubt. Yeah, of course, anytime.